Hi, besties. Listen closely because everything you thought you knew about this family is about to change. Today, we are exposing the truth that was denied for years. The basement wife, the hidden hierarchy, the quiet damage, and the moment it all finally cracks. If you think you know this story, stay with me because the real tea is just starting. And trust me, you do not want to miss what comes next. So hit that subscribe button right now, join the besties, and turn on notifications because once you see this, you will never see this family the same way again. Hi besties, welcome back because today we are pulling back the curtain on something that was whispered, denied, minimized, and brushed off for years until now. And it starts with a quiet moment that sounds calm but feels loaded. A woman saying she's meeting with church leadership asking for a spiritual release, a religious divorce, not signed on paper but felt in the soul. And immediately the reaction is not celebration or relief but tension, because the idea of returning to that world feels unsafe. Plural marriage, she says, is toxic, and that single word changes everything. Because once you admit that truth, the entire structure begins to crack, and suddenly memories resurface, moments from past seasons that now feel different, scenes we watched without fully understanding their weight. Christine sitting with Robin talking about the idea of a basement wife, a term that landed heavy and awkward, and instead of empathy, it was met with confusion, denial, and deflection. Janelle and Mary acted like they had never heard the phrase. Robin brushed it aside, protected the system, and framed it as something that did not exist. And at the time, many viewers accepted that explanation. But now the story shifts, because fast forward and Christine is talking openly with David about being a basement wife. And this time, Mary admits, yes, it is a concept. Janelle admits, yes, it happens. And suddenly, what was once denied is now acknowledged. But with a twist, because now the narrative becomes, we were all basement wives at some point. Everyone took a turn, everyone felt sidelined, and on the surface, that sounds fair and balanced, but it quietly erases the deeper truth. Because feeling neglected is not the same as being structurally hidden. And Christine explains this with visible anxiety even years later. The basement wife is not just about where you sleep, it's about hierarchy. It's about being placed emotionally and physically beneath another wife. It's about being unseen, unprotected, and unprioritized. And in many polygamous homes, the basement is not just a space, it's a symbol. The place where a wife is tucked away because she cannot be presented to the world, because she's not the legal wife. And even though in Lehi they lived in separate apartments, the mentality remained. Christine carried the weight. She cooked, she cleaned, she raised children, she mediated conflicts, she absorbed emotional labor, and she did it quietly because that was her role. And here's where the loop tightens. Because while she was holding everything together, the system denied her experience and told her it did not exist. And that denial mattered, because when pain is denied, it doesn't disappear, it just gets buried. And years later, it resurfaces in moments like this. Mary acknowledges the basement wife concept exists and calls it heartbreaking. Janelle reframes it by saying, she was also the basement wife in the early years, which may have been true briefly when it was just her and Mary, but once Christine entered, the family dynamics shifted dramatically. And even Janelle has admitted how much she relied on Christine, how Christine organized her life, cared for her children, and kept the household running. And Christine herself has said that while she loves Janelle, their personalities created a dynamic where Christine, as a people pleaser, could easily lose herself doing everything for others. And this matters because when Robin speaks, she insists that hierarchy is not condoned by their church and says if it happens, people are just not being cool. And that phrase sounds casual, but it avoids responsibility, because here is the contradiction. If legal marriage did not matter, why fight so hard to become the legal wife? Why did everything change once that status shifted? Why did authority, access, and resources consolidate? Why did other wives feel pushed lower the moment one woman gained legal legitimacy? And the truth that keeps surfacing is that legal marriage does matter because it determines who is visible, who is protected, and who has power. And Robin was never hidden. She never lived in poverty. She never lived in the basement emotionally or physically. She entered as the favorite and remained insulated. And that is why her denial feels hollow, because the system worked for her. And then there's Cody, the constant thread running through every story. The one who compared wives even while claiming he never did. The one who praised one woman to pressure another. Who told Christine to be more like Mary, then told others to be more like Robin. Rotating affection, rotating attention, creating competition while insisting everything was equal. And this triangulation shaped how each woman saw herself and each other. And Christine even acknowledges she does not believe Mary was intentionally trying to dominate, but intention does not erase impact. And being the legal wife came with privileges others could never access. And that gap in experience means they will never fully understand each other because they lived different realities under the same roof. And just when it feels like the story has reached its peak, another truth finally surfaces, one whispered for years but never confirmed on camera. Christine reveals that she and Cody are related, distant but related. And while it is legally permitted, it exposes something deeper about closed communities, small circles, and generational connections. Christine admits she wanted to marry a convert specifically to avoid marrying someone she was related to, and yet still ended up connected by blood because in such insular groups, everyone is connected somehow. And that revelation reframes everything because it highlights how limited choice really was and how normalized things become when you grow up inside a system that tells you this is just how it is. And David's reaction mirrors the audience discomfort because suddenly what felt like rumor becomes reality. And this loops back to the bigger picture: secrecy, normalization, and denial. And this is why viewers cannot look away, because every time the story seems settled, another layer peels back, revealing contradictions, consequences, and unanswered questions. And Christine's decision to seek a spiritual release is not just about leaving a man. It's about leaving a belief system that told her where she belonged and who she was allowed to be. And once someone leaves and finds peace, the system loses its power. And that is why this moment feels so heavy, because it forces everyone, including the audience, to confront what was denied, minimized, and hidden for years. And this is only the beginning. The deeper you go into the story, the more you realize that every woman is telling the truth, and yet none of them are telling the same truth. Because truth inside a plural marriage depends entirely on where you stood in the hierarchy and how protected you were by the structure. And this is where the tension really escalates. Because Mary explains her experience by saying that in the early years before Robin entered, Cody rotated his attention between wives, and she insists there was never one consistent favorite. And from her position, that feels accurate, because rotation still included her access as the legal wife. She was publicly acknowledged, she traveled with him, she represented the marriage to the outside world, and she had a level of legitimacy that was never questioned. And so while she experienced emotional pain, jealousy, insecurity, and neglect, she never experienced erasure in the same way Christine did. And that distinction matters because pain is not a competition, but context shapes impact. And Christine's context was fundamentally different. She was never the legal wife. She was never publicly acknowledged. She was never protected by legality. And instead, she was assigned responsibility. She became the emotional regulator, the caregiver, the peacekeeper, the one expected to sacrifice for the good of the family and smile while doing it. And this expectation was not accidental. It was built into the structure and reinforced daily through behavior, silence, and denial. And when Christine now says she does not want conflict, she just wants distance, it suddenly makes sense because she has spent years in the middle, absorbing everyone else's emotions, mediating arguments, smoothing tension, and being told that if something felt wrong, it was her perception, not reality. And this is why apologies now feel insufficient, because they address moments, not systems. And the system itself rewarded compliance and punished discomfort. And as these conversations unfold on screen, the audience is watching a slow dismantling of a narrative that was carefully curated for years. The idea that plural marriage was functional, fair, and spiritually fulfilling. And now, without dramatic confrontation, without shouting or accusations, the truth is leaking out through admissions, offhand comments, and uncomfortable laughter. And then there is the biological reality that adds another layer of unease. Christine's revelation about being related to Cody is not presented as scandal, but it lands heavily because it exposes how small and insular the community really is, and how limited options become when everyone shares common ancestry. And while third cousins once removed is legally acceptable, it exists within a broader historical context where closer relationships were normalized. And this history matters because it highlights how survival of the system often outweighed individual well-being and choice. And Christine's admission that she specifically wanted to marry a convert to avoid marrying a relative, only to still end up connected by blood, underscores how constrained her choices were and how normalized those constraints became. And when Janelle responds by saying that kind of connection is not that abnormal in their world, it reinforces the point, because abnormality loses meaning when it is common practice. And this normalization extends beyond marriage into parenting, emotional health, and identity. Because when children grow up watching hierarchy, denial, and sacrifice framed as virtue, they internalize those values and carry them forward. And this is why Christine leaving is such a powerful disruption, because it breaks the pattern and exposes the cost. And Robin's continued insistence that hierarchy is not condoned begins to sound increasingly disconnected, because systems do not need formal approval to function. They only need silence and benefit. And Robin benefited from the system from the moment she entered. She had stability, resources, and emotional priority. And whether intentional or not, that position shaped her experience. Perspective and made denial easier. And this is where viewers feel the tension, because the show itself once echoed that denial and now quietly corrects course, acknowledging realities it once dismissed. And the most striking part is how calm these revelations are delivered. There is no dramatic music, no explosive confrontation, just quiet honesty. And that quietness makes it more unsettling because it feels real. And as the layers continue to peel back, one thing becomes clear. The basement wife was never a temporary role. It was a structural position designed to absorb labor without recognition. And Christine embodied that role for years. And her decision to seek a spiritual release represents more than a personal boundary. It represents a refusal to continue participating in a system that required her to diminish herself for harmony. And the question that lingers and keeps viewers watching is not who was right or wrong, but how many moments were reframed, minimized, or denied to keep the image intact. And now that the truth is being spoken, there is no returning to the old narrative, because once you see the structure, you cannot unsee it. And the story continues to unfold, not with accusations, but with clarity. And that clarity is what makes this chapter impossible to ignore. So besties, after everything we uncovered today, one thing is clear. The truth always finds its way to the surface, no matter how long it is buried. This story is bigger than one family. It is about silence, power, and finally choosing yourself. And if this opened your eyes even a little, make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and join the besties, because we are just getting started and you do not want to miss what we are exposing next.